My name is Annette Bauer and I'm Research Fellow at PSSRU, which stands for Personal Social Services Research Unit, and we are based at the London School of Economics and Political Science. So perinatal mental illness refers to mental illness during pregnancy as well as the year after birth, and it affects 1 in 5 women. It's already quite a challenging time for many women in terms of their changes in their financial situation with their partners, family, but for those who are affected it's obviously a hard time, and also there is a lot of evidence that shows that there's an impact on children, and that relates to impact in form of emotional, behavior and cognitive development of children. Service provision is highly patchy at the moment, and until recently there hasn't been much policy attention on this area to actually ensure that change happens at a large enough scale. So for example, we know that only 50% of women actually are identified with perinatal mental illnesses, and of those only 60% get access to treatment, and an even smaller proportion gets appropriate treatment. Also, we know that there's a lot of focus at the moment on the postnatal period, whereas there is evidence that most symptoms of anxiety, or for most women, symptoms of anxiety and depression, for example, start already during the antenatal period. What has been shown is that during the antenatal period, it mainly refers to biological paths, and so for example, one path is the increased stress in women that then leads to increased cortisol in women, and that has through the womb an effect on the fetus, and this is called fetal programming. And then the mechanisms after birth are more psychological, and they refer to parenting behavior and, for example, different abilities to actually breastfeed children, and this is influenced by mental illnesses and has an impact on infant attachment. So in our study we looked at the cost to the public sector in form of, for example, NHS treatment, social care costs and school support, and then we also looked at the cost from a broader societal perspective. So that, for example, includes things like productivity losses to the individual and quality of life losses. And what we try to do is to actually model the negative impact over the full lifetime for mothers and children. So for mothers, that also relates not only to the experience they had during the perinatal period, but also to subsequent experience they had as a result of the initial episode. Because there's evidence that mothers who had mental illness during this time, during the perinatal time, also are more likely to have subsequent episodes. So we were modeling the cost that has in terms of treatment that becomes necessary to support women, but also the quality of life losses they experience. For children, we were modeling the full range of cost in terms of negative impact on emotional, behavior and cognitive problems, and also the need for potential treatment they might require, but also things like school resources that might be needed, for example, to support special education, children that have been identified as having special educational needs. And also things like, for example, there's evidence that children are less likely to perform well in school, and we measured those impacts and the cost that has to individuals over their lifetime in form of reduced expected earnings. Per woman giving birth, that relates to just under £10,000, And this refers to the 3 conditions that we were able to capture because there was enough evidence for those, and that includes anxiety, depression, and psychosis. And most of these costs refer to anxiety, but still a fifth of these actually relate to public sector costs, either in form for paying for treatment, but also in form of paying for school support for children and criminal justice costs, for example, for children with behavior problems who are more likely to be involved in the criminal justice system. What is important is that the spending is ensuring that there's equitable access to services across the country, because that's at the moment a problem with some areas having a lot of services, relatively good support for women with perinatal mental illness, and other areas almost having nothing in place to support women. It's also important that the distribution of funding goes into the identification and screening of women and support for women with low to moderate symptoms in community settings provided by health visitors, midwives and GPs, as well as funding that goes into more specialist services for women who experience more moderate to severe symptoms of perinatal mental illness. And this might include community-based specialist perinatal care options and mother and baby units, for example. So we found that the largest proportion of costs actually related to children rather than to mothers, and these are the potentially preventable costs if support is provided early enough. At the moment, we don't know if negative child outcomes can be prevented, and we need more research to go into this area. But there is a good chance that if we prevent early and if we find, if we are able to identify or help mothers to come forward with conditions and the experience of mental illness early on, that we can reduce some of those negative child outcomes.